Should the Democratic Party or should the House pursue impeachment?
Not right now. I think what we need to do is have Bob Mueller testify. We need to have the committees do their work.
There's definitely differences of opinion on the ultimate question of impeachment, but I have to say there was a consensus opinion on exactly what we should do next in terms of concrete investigative steps.
There is ample evidence, and there has been for a long time now, that we should have this debate in the Congress.
Welcome back. House Democrats seem just as divided on impeachment tonight as they did yesterday. And that was before House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's conference call with her caucus, which was supposed to unite Democrats on the path forward after the Mueller report's release. But there was some notable dissent on that call. Democratic Congressman Jared Huffman was on the call last night. He told his colleagues that it is not good for the country not to impeach. In other words, good for the country to impeach, I guess. Congressman, thank you for taking a few minutes and joining us right now. So, well, let me ask you about that. It sounds like we talked about this a few minutes ago. We heard from Nancy Pelosi today. She says impeachment, in her view, is very divisive. It's something maybe to consider down the road, but she wants to just go through some investigations right now and not open that door to impeachment. You're saying do it right now.
Well, look, I think there's a lot more unity in the Democratic caucus than this particular media cycle is perhaps suggesting. The next steps are what matter, right? A thorough investigation, a full-throated investigation with unflinching accountability. That's what Leader Pelosi is proposing. That's what just about everybody in our caucus believes needs to happen. I think that impeachment is the essential context that's happening in, and I would call it an impeachment process, but we can call it whatever you want. If the functional impeachment process is moving forward, which I think it is, I'm fine with that.
So you're satisfied, the approach that Nancy Pelosi's outlined, you're satisfied with that? Do you sense that others on this call, we had, I think Val Deming's name came up, who said on the same call, proceed with impeachment now. You think they're satisfied as well?
I think many of us believe this is inevitably leading to impeachment, just based on what we already know on obstruction of justice, on the guy who we know is individual one as an unindicted co-conspirator in the Southern District of New York, and on other things that we expect to be forthcoming as this investigation moves forward. But it's not essential that that be designated as an impeachment process or an impeachment inquiry right now in order to continue that investigation. At some point, I think it will lead to that, and Leader Pelosi and others have been very clear in saying it may well lead to that, and that is not being taken off the table. So I think we're all moving forward together here.
Is there a point, though, just realistically, again, we've talked about the idea that impeachment, it's ultimately a political process. This was put in the hands of Congress. This wasn't put in the hands of a court. So if you go through a series of investigations here, I imagine that's going to take time. I imagine, tell me if I'm wrong, we're talking months here. You get to a point where it's late in the year 2019, it's early in the year 2020. You have a presidential campaign in full force. At some point, does the presidential campaign supersede any potential impeachment, and you make the judgment that, hey, let's put this out there in the court of public opinion and let the voters decide?
Well, Steve, you're right. Impeachment is, at its core, a political question for the House of Representatives to answer. But that doesn't mean you put your finger in the wind and you do a bunch of polling and you try to calculate how this thing is going to cut in terms of political self-interest. I think it refers to the body politic. What is good for the country? Has a president violated the oath of office and done things that are destructive to the country?
But I don't mean to interrupt, but what I'm asking, I guess, is this. Is there a point here where the election's approaching, and I'm not talking about putting your finger in the wind and taking it by a poll, but where you say, this shouldn't be my decision, this shouldn't be Congress's decision, this should be the voters' decision. Let's put all of this before them and let them decide in the election and not have Congress take an impeachment vote.
Well, this is where I made the point on our conference call, and I'll continue to make it. We better think very carefully about the downside of punting on our constitutional responsibility. Because when you do that, you now have a president that for the next year and a half knows he can't be indicted by the Department of Justice because of their internal policy, and would then also know that Congress doesn't have the stomach to do its job under the Constitution. Who knows what that invites from Donald Trump? Who knows what it invites by way of abuse from future presidents? Because you're essentially saying that the entire impeachment authority in the Constitution is now just a bunch of dead letters because Congress no longer has the stomach to do it.
I will ask you about the polling here, and I'll ask you in this context. Nancy, as a divisive exercise for the country. Jerry Nadler, who would chair any impeachment proceeding on the Judiciary Committee 20 years ago when Bill Clinton was being impeached, he said one of the standards at that point, he said one of the standards that should exist for any impeachment is broad support that is not just limited to one political party. He said if it's one political party supporting it and one political party opposing it, there is considerable damage to our democratic institutions. That was one of his arguments 20 years ago. Is there a point there? Because we look at the polling on this right now. Strong support from Democrats, strong opposition from Republicans. It sounds like that recipe that Nadler was saying you can't have.
Well, it should be bipartisan. Ideally, it would be. And let me be clear, my position on holding this president accountable through an impeachment inquiry is shared by a whole lot of Republicans, including George Conway, including Bill Kristol, including Evan McMullin. I mean, a whole bunch of people that are certainly not Democrats. So this is about whether you care about our democratic institutions and the rule of law, not necessarily your party label. The real question, the hard questions that ought to be asked are of those Republicans in Congress right now who appear to have joined the Fifth Avenue Club. I'm not sure there's anything that they could be shown that would ever get them to hold this president accountable to the rule of law. So really, I think they've got a tougher burden of explanation on this question of impeachment than I do.
All right, Congressman Jared Huffman, Democrat from California. Thank you for taking a few minutes with us.
Thanks for having me.
Hello, YouTubers. If you're watching this, it means you've checked out our channel, so thank you. Now do me a favor, subscribe by clicking on that button down there. Click on any of the videos to watch the latest interviews and highlights from MTP Daily and MSNBC. You can get more Meet the Press content every morning in the First Read newsletter. If you're tired of content that you don't know anything about where it came from, you don't have to have that problem with us. NBC News, MSNBC, MTP, and the Meet the Press mindset right here for you on YouTube. Subscribe now.